You walk into a room and forget why you went there. You read a paragraph, reach the end. Nothing stayed. You have a conversation, a real one, and 2 days later, the details are gone. Not the feeling, just the content, the specifics, the parts that should have stayed. Most people call this stress or age. But that explanation is starting to fail because this isn't a lapse in focus, it's a wipe. Something is rewriting the record, quietly. In the exact moments your memory should be working and isn't. And once you see the pattern, you don't just notice it, you start noticing what's missing. There's a specific kind of absence that's hard to describe. Not the absence of events, but the absence of detail. You go through your day, you talk to people, you move through places, and everything seems normal until you try to remember it, and what you find is incomplete. Not empty, but reduced, flattened, like something was there, but didn't fully register. And the more you notice it, the harder it is to ignore, because it's not happening in extreme moments. It's happening in the ordinary ones, the ones that should have stayed, the ones that usually define how a day feels when you look back, and yet they're the first to disappear, which creates a strange kind of experience, where life feels continuous in the moment, but discontinuous in memory, as if something is interrupting the process that turns experience into something that can be kept. And once you start seeing that, you realize this isn't random. It follows a pattern, one that has less to do with memory itself and more to do with how memory is formed. There was a version of you that remembered things, not everything, but enough. The conversation from last Tuesday, the name of the person you met at that event, a Saturday morning from years ago. Not just that it happened, but the texture of it, the quality of the light. That version of you is still there, but something changed in how the recording works. You don't notice it in dramatic moments. You notice it in small ones. You go to tell a story, something real, something yours, and halfway through, the details begin to slip. Not the emotional residue, that stays, but the content, the specifics, the parts that make a memory yours. Instead of just a vague signal that something once happened, the tape is still running, but what it captures now is thinner, more transparent, like a recording made over another recording, over another, until the original signal is buried under noise. This is where the pattern begins, not in a diagnosis, not in a single event, but in the quiet erosion of moments that should have stayed and didn't, which means something changed, not in memory itself, but in the system that makes memory possible. And understanding that system means going one layer deeper than memory. Memory doesn't fail all at once. It degrades quietly in the background while everything still feels normal. What changed wasn't your ability to remember. It was the conditions required to form a memory in the first place. Because memory isn't just storage, it's a process, and that process has stages. First, something has to be registered, then stabilized, then stored, and finally retrieved. Break any part of that sequence, and the memory never fully exists. This is what the research quietly points to. The brain doesn't record experiences like a camera. It encodes them through attention, through presence, through continuity. And when that continuity breaks, the encoding breaks with it. Every time you switch tasks, something is left unfinished, a fragment, a trace, a residue, not enough to remember, but enough to interfere. The next moment arrives and lands on top of that residue, distorted, incomplete. This is where the pattern begins, because the system never resets. It accumulates, layer after layer, until the signal is no longer clean, but interference. At the same time, the system speeds up. More input, more switching, more fragments, faster, always faster. The brain tries to keep up, but it wasn't designed for this rate of rotation, so something starts to give. Details blur, boundaries collapse. Moments stop separating from each other, and without separation, nothing stabilizes, nothing consolidates, nothing becomes memory. This changes how the mind experiences time, because memory is what creates continuity. It's what connects one moment to the next. And without that connection, experience becomes fragmented, disconnected, hard to locate, hard to trust. Which is why this doesn't feel like simple distraction. It feels like something else, something harder to name. Like you're present, but not fully there. And that feeling isn't random. It's the result of a system under constant interruption. A system that never gets the conditions it needs to finish what it starts. Which leads to the part most people never question. You start noticing it in small behaviors. You open an app and close it seconds later, not because you finished, but because your system is searching for a signal that isn't there. You switch, then switch again and again. Not searching, just reacting. You try to focus, but the silence becomes uncomfortable, stretching, heavy. So you kill it. You reach for the phone in the elevator, in the line for coffee, in the 30 seconds between tasks. You think you're killing time, but you're killing the process. This is the part most people misunderstand. They think they need more discipline, but discipline doesn't fix a system that has no cooldown state. Memory needs the void. It needs the boredom you just removed. Without that space, the recording never stabilizes. It stays soft, smudged by the next input. Every micro decision, check, scroll, ignore, is a leak, a slow drain. By noon, the system is already depleted, and slowly, your days stop feeling structured. They blur. Not because nothing happened, but because nothing settled long enough to become real. Moments feel thinner. Time feels harder to track. Not because it's moving faster, but because less of it is being anchored. And the strangest part? The system adapts. It starts to prefer the fragment over the whole, the flicker over the flame, until you're no longer building your history. You're just watching it fail to form. So the problem isn't that you forgot. It's that the moment was never fully recorded. And once you see that, you stop asking, why can't I remember? And start asking something else. What conditions did this moment have when it was created? Because memory doesn't depend on importance. It depends on state. The state of your attention, the state of your environment, the state of interruption. Two moments can feel identical, but one becomes memory, and the other disappears. Not because it mattered less, but because it never had the conditions to become real. This is what the system quietly reveals. You don't lose your past all at once. You lose it in fragments, in small invisible gaps, in moments that pass through you, but never stay. And over time, those gaps accumulate until your memory isn't made of events, but of missing pieces, which changes something deeper. It changes how you experience yourself, because identity isn't built from what happens. It's built from what stays. This is the part most people never see. You're not just forgetting moments. You're losing the continuity that makes those moments yours. And without continuity, there's no narrative, no structure, no stable sense of who you've been, which is why this feels subtle, hard to explain, easy to ignore. Because nothing dramatic breaks, it just fades. And if nothing changes, that fading becomes the default, not just for memory, but for experience itself, which leads to something deeper, not about attention, not about productivity, but about what remains when nothing is fully kept. Maybe this is why it feels different, not like forgetting, but like something is missing, not in what happened, but in what stayed. Because memory isn't just recall, it's continuity. It's what allows one moment to connect to the next, and when that connection weakens, experience starts to fragment. Moments don't build, they don't accumulate, they pass through you, without leaving structure behind. And without structure, there's nothing to return to, nothing to reference, nothing to hold. Which means the question was never, why can't I remember? It was something else. What is no longer being kept? Because what isn't kept doesn't become part of you. It disappears. Not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly, over time, until what remains feels thinner, less defined, less real. And if memory is what gives shape to your experience, then losing it slowly doesn't just change what you remember. It changes what you are. So, this was never about forgetting, and it was never about trying harder. It was about something quieter, something structural, the conditions that allow a moment to become part of you. Because memory doesn't just store your life, it builds it, it connects it, it gives it shape. And when that process starts to fail, what you lose isn't just information, it's continuity, it's presence. It's the sense that your experience is actually being kept. And without that, life doesn't stop. It just stops accumulating. Which means the real question isn't what you remember. It's what never had the chance to become memory in the first place. Because what isn't recorded isn't just forgotten, it's gone. To continue this understanding, watch the next video here. And to understand human behavior at a deeper level, subscribe to Decoded Way.